This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. After experiencing trauma, I went to therapy, and my therapist guided me through a difficult time in my life. They helped me understand what was happening and provided me with tools to cope and find my own strength and resilience. Their experience and compassion were invaluable and enabled me to rebuild my life and move forward. I strongly believe in the power of therapy to help people through difficult times. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. First, you go to their site. You can use my link, betterhelp.com/resilience. You answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who has years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/resilience or choose podcast, then Notes on Resilience during sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month. Hi, welcome to Notes on Resilience. I'm your host, Manya Chilinsky. In today's conversation, I speak with Jay Thompson from hikethemountain.org. We had a great conversation about organizational culture, about creating value, about hiking, and about personal faith. And we talked about resiliency and how we all have to hike our own hike. And we've all got those muddy paths that we walk through. I hope you enjoy listening to this conversation as much as I enjoyed talking with Jay. Hey, Jay, it's so good to see you. How are you today?
I'm great, Manya. How are you doing?
I am doing awesome. You know, I want to introduce people to you, but before we get into your story of who you are and what you do, I would love for you to tell me if you could have any superpower in the world, what would it be?
And kind of prep for the call and stuff today. I saw that question and I knew it was coming. So I thought about putting on my superhero outfit, but I thought maybe since this is not going to be video, then maybe it wouldn't translate. But for me, my favorite superhero of all time has to be Captain America.
Okay.
And what I like about Captain America and why I would love the superpower of Captain America is that his superpower was in him before he got the superpower. It's really his character of who he was as a person. And then when he got the super soldier formula and became Captain America and all of that, he throws his mighty shield and does all the stuff and all of that. It really amplified who he was already. And I love the thought of an ordinary guy doing extraordinary things. And that's probably why I would choose Captain America. Loved him as a comic book character, loved all the movies, but that would be my superhero.
Oh, wow. That's great. I love that idea of he already had his superpower and this was just kind of, ramping that up. Very cool. Well, thank you for sharing. And who are you and what do you do? And how are you in a place to be thinking about things like resilience and compassion?
Yeah. Who am I? That's a deep question. And what do? I get to ask that question a lot because for me, up until about 3 years ago, I had been in local church ministry. I've been in ministry for 30 plus years. I still do an online ministry called Simply Church Online. But over the past 3 years, I've stepped out of the day-to-day local ministry. And for me, I really have taken a message of something I'm passionate about, which is hiking. And I've used that metaphor to talk with organizations about becoming and living the culture that they say they believe in, and how to translate that belief into behavior. And so who am I? First of all, I'm a person of faith. Second, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, and then I am a communicator at heart. I think that is probably, for me, I identified it about 10 years ago for me. I knew there was 4 lanes that I knew I was supposed to be in my life, and that was to preach, teach, coach, and serve. And if I'm in one of those lanes, things are good, people are good. If I get out of that lanes, I will frustrate you and I will frustrate myself. And so that for me, who I am is at my heart, I'm a coach and I'm a speaker. that I share about the things that I find value in. And so that's kind of who I am.
I like that. Preach, teach, coach, and serve.
Yep.
I'm not sure all of us have necessarily identified our lanes, so that's very advanced of you, I feel.
Well, it's not because I'm great. I have just I've spent too much time of my life out of those lanes that I've learned. Those would probably be, if I was bowling, those would be the bumper guards in my life that I need to make sure I stay there so it doesn't things don't get better.
That's so great. Well, our podcast is called Notes on Resilience. So I have to ask you, what do you think about the word resilience?
First of all, it's one of the hardest words for me to spell. It's like, thank goodness for spell check when I'm typing that word. But resilience to me, I guess there's a word picture that comes to my mind, and that's a rubber band, right? And a rubber band can be stretched. It can be used for various different things, either to keep things together, right, or keep things secure. And a rubber band, as much as it's stretched, it comes back after you take it off of its whatever object it's using to do its rubber banding on. It snaps back. And to me, that's resilience, is the ability to be able to stretch and accomplish the things, being flexible that you need to. If you take that analogy all the way, there is a point where the rubber band snaps. And there's a point in all of our lives where we snap, I guess, too. But there is, whether it's stretched out or whether it's not, the essence of the rubber band is the same. And I think that's what resilience is being the same, whether I'm stretched out or not, and being able to, after those moments of stretching and having to be bigger than I thought I was going to be or needed to be or whatever, that when I come back to that, I still have my purpose. I still have my value. I still have the essence of who I am. So that probably, from a word picture standpoint, if I was defining resilience, it'd be a rubber band.
I like the thought that it's the essence of who we are, whether we're stretched out or we're not stretched out. We still have that in us. So, and that is a picture of personal resilience. We each have a certain amount of stretchiness, to continue the metaphor. How do you feel that the role of our systems or our organizations, like maybe even our workplaces, how can they support or thwart our personal resiliency?
You're talking about from an organizational standpoint, right?
Yes.
I think if I were stepping back and I was consulting an organization when it comes to their systems and processes. Now, again, whether you're in a financial institution, whether you're in a doctor's or healthcare or, a trucking business or whatever, there are set things that need to be done, right? I mean, I just went to the doctor, and when you talk to the doctor, they'll ask you your name, your birthday, why you're here. They'll go, and everybody that comes in the door asks you that same thing, because they have a procedure to make sure that they don't make mistakes and things like that. And I think you could translate that to most any type of organization. The thing is that when the following the processes and systems becomes more important than what the systems and processes were designed to accomplish, that's when they get in the way. And so I think you need to have right systems and processes in place. But I also think within that system, you need to give yourself some margin to be able to adjust. Too often, I think John Maxwell said it this way, is that talking about margin in our life, is that you have to have enough margin, because if not, you have nowhere to go when things go crazy, when things go difficult, when things get out of whack, because, systems and processes are written for when everything goes great.
Right.
But when it doesn't, you need to have some margin to be able to adjust that way. So I think if there's too much rigidity in your systems and processes, that has an incredible impact on your personal resiliency.
Yeah. And you think a lot about organizational culture, and what role, or is there a role of an organization's culture in supporting or thwarting someone's resiliency or ability to heal?
I think at the heart of culture is remembering that an organization's culture is made up of the entirety of all the individuals. And when you think about it that way, there are certain things that the majority of people will respond in one way or the other, a typical response. But I think you have to understand from a cultural standpoint that it's okay to understand that people are different and how people respond to things. You and I have had a lot of conversations about connecting with people and things like that. We've groups that we have connections with. And, at my heart, man, I love competition. I want to get after it. Let's keep score. I'm okay. I want to push. I want accountability and challenge. But not everybody responds to that. And I think what happens is when the culture only has one trick, if you will, it misses a lot of people. Let me use another metaphor. I love sports. I played baseball, football my whole life. I coach with my son-in-law, a travel girls softball team. And what I have learned is this: you cannot coach every player the same way. Mm-hmm. You have the same direction. You have the same purpose. But some of them, you've got to get in their face and get after them. Others, you've got to come around and put your arm around them and whisper and talk and encourage. And I think from a organizational structure standpoint, when it comes to your culture has to be, here is our big value system. Here's our mission and purpose and vision and all of those things. But how that impacts each individual and is translated to each individual and how each individual is probably going to live that out. We have to allow enough space for some people to be original in their response to that, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And I wonder if somebody listening to this might be thinking, well, that sounds like a lot of work. If each of these people in my organization are going to be responding to things differently, and I need to be able to respond to them differently, what would you say to somebody who said something like that?
I'd say, well, I guess you're going to need another job. No, just kidding. No, I would say this: focus on clarity of purpose and mission. Mm-hmm. Give flexibility and freedom in the implementation of it. I think too often we want to cast the vision, but then we want to tell everybody how to do it. And what I have learned is that if I can cast a vision and bring clarity to the vision, the way people on the team accomplish that is done in a variety of ways I never even thought of. And actually, they're better than I ever thought of. And so I think you have to do that. Clarity of vision, but freedom of implementation of that, or at least some innovation and creativity in implementation of the vision.
Yes. Maybe with some of those guideposts or bumpers like you were talking about.
Right.
So interesting. So Jay, you are also an avid hiker, and I feel like, I'm not even sure what my question is, but I know there's a connection between hiking and resilience and your ability to bounce back. And I wonder if you could share something about that with us.
Well, you just became my best friend when we get to talk about hiking. I love doing that. For me, when I was 40 years old, I set a goal that I wanted to hike the entire Appalachian Trail before I turned 50. Mm-hmm. It was just under 2,200 miles. I'm 54 now. I haven't done all 2,200. I've done a little over 1,700 of the miles on the Appalachian Trail. I love hiking. And here's what I know. The only way to get to mile 2,200 is to take the first step and then take the next step and the next step. And to me, I can't think of a better picture of resiliency than it's one step, two step, three step, four step all the time. I make little videos on my social media stuff. And I always say this: if you want to hike the mountain, you do it one step at a time. And that's what resiliency is. Resiliency is, let me go to my quote from Frozen 2, it's just do the next right thing. I mean, take the next step, just do the next step. And that's resiliency. So, I mean, I think about that. We just went up to, we're in Vermont and Connecticut and Vermont area this fall hiking. We did about 150 miles, me and my hiking buddy. And very few times have I been on the trail where it was as wet and muddy, not because of rain, but just so much water on the trail. And when I think about resiliency, I was thinking about it when I was hiking. It really kind of hit me, is that when you're hiking and all of a sudden you look ahead of you, and for the next 150 yards, it's nothing but mud. And you're not sure if you're going to sink down 2 inches or you're going to go to the middle of your shin. You just don't know. And resiliency is this, and I thought about this with that water and mud in the trail. Sometimes you've got to find a way around it, That's what, you've got to go, oh, I can't go where I thought I was. So I don't want to get my shoes dirty, and I don't want to sink in the mud and be stuck here until somebody else comes along and finds me. So I've got to go around it. But sometimes there's not an option to go around it. You simply have to go through it, and you have to get dirty in the process, and that's okay. And resiliency, and I think wisdom comes from knowing which ones to hike around and which ones to hike through. Mm-hmm. But resilience is that at the end of the day, I'm going to continue to get through it. So
I love hearing you say that. Just a quick personal story. I went through a particularly large trauma and got to a point where I felt, I think metaphorically, just like you were talking about, where there was just deep mud all around me and I just had to keep going. And I didn't know what was going to happen. And I remember kind of thinking of it on the meta level, like realizing that's what was happening. And I just had to keep taking a step forward because there really wasn't another choice. I've not very many muddy trails where I've experienced it in reality the way that you have. What is
Can I add one thing to that?
Yes.
Here's the thing. Everybody has their own muddy trail in their life.
Yes.
And sometimes the quickest way I think you can connect with somebody is if understanding what the muddy trail is in their life and not minimalizing it because it's not a muddy trail for you in your life, that specific thing. And I think just that understanding of we all have a trail, we all have a hike to hike. They're going to be different, but we're all going to experience the mud along the way. And my mud may not be your mud, but we all share mud, if you will.
I love where this conversation is going. And this is why I love talking to you, Jay, because you can just make it so clear. And, I think a lot about resilience, and you're right. We all have things that we're going through, and most of us don't know what the rest of us are going through.
Right.
And that's why when I think about organizations and workplaces in particular, I think about the importance of supporting the whole messy human being who shows up to that job. Because our workplaces are a community, and, community support is important for us as individuals.
Right. And I think the challenge when it comes to the work that we do, and when we work with other people in an organization, is at the end of the day, there is a product or service that needs to be delivered for the business to keep going. Because if it doesn't, it's a great community, but it's not going to continue to be a community because it's going to go out of business.
Right.
And so it's finding the balance between that. And I think that balance is leadership understanding everybody as an individual, but it's also every individual understanding that leadership has a responsibility to continue to accomplish what the organization needs to accomplish. And it's a balance between those two. And I think too often where we get out of balance is when either of those get more focused on themselves than on other people.
Yes. And it can be very difficult, just thinking from the individual standpoint, it can be very difficult when you see something that you wish could be different, or can be different, and that isn't a priority for whatever reason to the leadership of the organization. And, you can feel invisible or frustrated, and as if the organization isn't being supportive.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a challenge for everybody. But I go back to, I think you and I have known each other long enough and know well enough that I have 1,000 ideas of what could happen. Let's do this. What about this? I love to share ideas. I love to be creative. And I had been that person in an organization where I look at something and here's 4 possible ways you could do this a whole lot better. Or here's 4 things we could add to this, and that kind of stuff. The thing that has lessened my frustration in those moments is when those in leadership that I'm trying to influence to change something, is when they have communicated clearly where we're going, but they've also often taken time to listen.
Yes.
And to be honest and saying, Jay, that's a great idea, but it's not something that we can do at the moment. Or maybe that's something we can come back to, or maybe that's something we can do. And so I think it is the balance in that frustration, when you're in that frustration time of going, here's something that you could improve, here's a way we could do this something better. And it is, if I was speaking to the leaders, it would be clarify your vision and communicate to your people that they're valued, but not the reason, if we say no to something, it's not saying no to you as an individual and your worth and your value, but it's saying no to that's not where the whole picture of where we're going. And so I think it's a balance between those two. Balance seems to be my word today.
It's a good word, especially for what we're talking about. And I love your point when we're thinking about leadership, to listen to what others are saying and then be honest about what is possible. And just thinking to some of my own experiences and frustrations or things that I've thought, could we do it this way? I know that when somebody hears what I'm saying and I know they've heard it, and then they are honest with me about whether they can or can't do it, it's just becomes so clear. Okay, I understand why you can't do it. And the times when somebody either hasn't listened or has misrepresented themselves are the ones that just can be so hurtful or frustrating. So yeah, balance. That is the word for the day. That's the word of the podcast. Is
there
balance.
we go.
Jay, you also mentioned you are a preacher, and I know that your faith is something that's very important to you. How do faith and resiliency walk together?
That's a great question. For me, personal faith, I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus. And for me, what that means from a resilient standpoint is my faith is, well, it says in the Bible, faith is the evidence of, of things not seen. Just believing in things that are not seen and trusting in that. And so I think for me, faith and resilience is that I've come to the point to realize in my life, there are things that are beyond my control that I can't take care of. And I have to trust and believe that for me, the Lord is the one that's going to still in control when I'm not. And there's a great passage that Paul wrote where it says, you're not, loose translation, okay, this is out of 1 Corinthians. It says that basically you're not going to face anything that God can either, and he goes back to the mud thing here, God's either not going to be with you through or help you take you out of it. And too often, when our faith is tested, that is when resiliency comes. It's easy to be faithful when it's easy. It's not easy to be faithful when you've actually got to exercise faith. And that's what resilience is not just saying you're a person of faith, but it's being willing to exercise those things I have put my faith in. That's what resiliency is in my faith.
Wow. Thank you. That's sort of having faith still having faith when it's really hard to have faith.
Yep.
Is a great way to be thinking about the concept of resiliency. And
one of my favorite quotes from that comes, Jesus is going to be healing this guy, and the guy says, he's going to go back. He says, go back, and your servant's going to be healed. And the Lord, and he says, I believe, Jesus, but help me in my unbelief. And I thought, wow, that is exactly where I live most of my time. I believe, but help me in my unbelief.
Yes,
that's resilience right there.
Yes. And what do you think is the relationship between resilience and compassion?
Well, I would think compassion, to me, when I think about compassion, is ultimately is treating somebody else, valuing somebody, adding value to them, and continuing to add value to them, even when they're, I'm going to just sound like Dr. Seuss here, even when they're not being valuable, if that makes sense. So compassion to me is that I'm expressing love in such a way to someone, regardless of whether they accept it, whether they deserve it, or whether they receive it. And resilience is continuing to do that and showing them compassion. I think we got to be careful. Compassion doesn't mean I love you no matter. Compassion means I love you in spite of this, but I'm also going, in the same way there is a love and tenderness to compassion, there is an accountability and challenge that comes with compassion. Because sometimes the most compassionate thing my parents ever did for me was discipline me so that I did not do things that Jay, this spanking is going to hurt me more than it hurts you. I will always wanted to say, well, then you give me the belt and turn around and let me give you a whooping. I never said that. But I thought about it. But it's so true that to me, so compassion and resiliency, if I was the way those are interrelated, I think is compassion is something that I express to someone else that's not dependent on their action. And I'm resilient regardless whether I think they deserve that or not.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So going back to organizations and society and our workplace, or however you want to think about beyond personal resiliency, what do you think is the most important action or policy that an organization can take to be really supportive of people who are in need of support, whether it's, trauma survivors or other folks who are just in need of support?
I think there's not a magic pill out there to say, here's a quote unquote benefit your organization can offer to everybody and it's going to fix. So I would probably be a little bit bigger picture in my answer of saying, I think it starts with the organization letting people know it's okay to be vulnerable and to be real and to admit when life's not all together. And I think when there is a culture of vulnerability, of the acceptance of vulnerability, and then providing opportunities in ways for people to share those vulnerabilities, because I know kind of some of the things that you've been through. And my guess is we're not always looking for someone to solve the problem. First of all, we just need somebody to listen.
Yes.
And I think and that for me, I've been married 30 plus years now. And I think that's one of the things for us in marriage is that I have learned with my wife, Mandy, when I want to fix everything, she's like, I want you to listen to me first before you try to fix something, because if you jump to the fixing, I have missed her. And I think from an organization standpoint, if we can provide opportunities that we create a culture where it's okay to communicate your vulnerabilities, and we give them everybody an opportunity to share why they're feeling vulnerable or in a difficult situation or whatever, I think it would start there. So I don't know whether that's like listening sessions. I don't know whether that's just, hey, here's a place to go post that. Or here's, one of the things, actually, as a consultant, something that I do with a bank, one of my roles that I was hired for as a consultant is not to be an HR person, but basically, here's the way I describe it. If you need somebody to talk to come into your office, you want to shut the door and say a lot of bad words out loud and just somebody to listen, that's kind of Jay's role. And I think that kind of a role, what I have found is it's less about solutions I brought to those people. Oftentimes they felt a whole lot better after they said all those words out loud. And then I walked out of the room.
Well, like we were saying, it's so important to be listened to. And that is such a valuable gift we can give each other, whatever subject we're talking about, whether it's trauma or resilience or something completely different, just truly listening to somebody. So Jay, as you know, I could talk to you for hours upon hours, but we've talked about organizational culture, we've talked about hiking, we've talked about faith. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I had asked you?
I'm not sure exactly how this relates to resiliency. I will say this relates to legacy, maybe it ties back in. But one of the unique things about me is my family structure. Mm-hmm. My son is 29, my daughter's 27. My son is single, my daughter's married. She's been married about 5 years now and going on 6. And she and Demetrius have a baby. We have a granddaughter. And not because of have to, but because we have chosen, we have in our house, we have 4 generations living in our house. Okay. When my mom passed about 3 years ago, my dad came to live with us. My wife and my daughter do some online business stuff together. And when my daughter and her husband and stuff lived in another house, they were at our house 75% of the time anyway, just because of that stuff that my son-in-law does. The job that my son has is he travels all over the United States doing time studies for different big organizations, and he's home probably 4 months of the year total. It just doesn't make sense for him to rent somewhere and all that. And because of just the way our house is and all of that, we've chosen to do that. And so what I have seen is there's nothing better. Where my office is, right this way over here to my office. So I know we're listening to audio, so I'm pointing over to the left. Next to my office is my dad's room. And there's nothing better during the day when I'm in the office when I hear my father with his great granddaughter laughing and cutting up in that room together. And that is legacy being passed on from him to her. And the fact that we have 4 generations here together, and that's something that I'm proud of. And it's by choice. Is it going to last forever? I don't know, but I'm going to enjoy every daggone moment that we have that way. So that's one of those things that I'm excited, proud, and humble to be able to have that in my stage of life right now.
Yeah. Oh, that's really special that your granddaughter and his great granddaughter are right there.
Yep.
So what would you tell maybe your granddaughter in a few years, or maybe your 18-year-old self, about resiliency or about compassion?
I think it would be, if I'm speaking to 18-year-old Jay, I know what I would say to him. Stop overestimating what you can do in 3 days and stop underestimating what you can do in 3 years. I am the guy that if I have the idea, we should have done it yesterday. That's my thought. We need to get after it. We need to do it. And I go back to something that sitting on the porch with my grandfather, Papa Tio, told me sitting on the porch one day. He said, listen, he called me Bird, because Jay Bird, he called me Bird. He would say, Bird, you cannot unplow a row. And I thought about that. What does that mean? Well, what that means is that if I get ahead and I plow up all the dirt in a direction that it doesn't really need to go, I can't undo that. And so I don't get ahead. Don't overestimate what's going to happen the next 3 days. And don't underestimate what's going to happen in the next 3 years, or really even 3 decades, if you want to look at it that way. So that's what I would tell my 18-year-old self if I had an opportunity, I guess.
If you could go back, well, what would you tell your granddaughter about resiliency?
I would tell her to dream big dreams and take practical steps toward that dream. That's what I would tell them.
Yeah, I like that. Dream big dreams. I would tell her. Great. Well, Jay, this has been fabulous. Before I let you go, can you tell me, how can our listeners reach you?
Probably the easiest would be through my Instagram at j.hikethemountain. I post on there quite often. Usually 4 or 5 times a week, I put a little short video up there, just some thoughts and stuff like that. You can go to the website at hikethemountain.org and find information about me. Or you can always email me. I'd love just to always have a conversation. I mean, that's how you and I got connected. We were in a speaking organization together, but through that, we just reached out to each other and a conversation started. So you can just email me at j@hikethemountain.org and I'll follow up, and I can Zoom with the best of them, because I learn from talking and sharing in that way. So that would be a great way to reach out to me.
Yes, and I can recommend Jay is a fabulous person to talk to. And I know, because you have probably enjoyed this conversation as much as I had.
Absolutely.
So thank you, everyone, and we appreciate you listening. Thank you for listening. I hope you got as much out of this conversation as I did. So if you'd like to learn more about me, Manya Chilinsky, I work with organizations to help understand how to create environments where people can thrive after difficult life experiences. And I do this through talks and consulting. I'm a survivor of mass violence, and I use my experience to help leaders learn about resiliency, compassion, and trauma-sensitive leadership, to build strategies to enable teams to thrive and be engaged amidst difficulty and turmoil. If this is something you want to learn more about, visit my website, www.manyachilinsky.com, or email me at manya@manyachilinsky, or stop by my social media on LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks so much.